So welcome to our first event of the year. And this is our first meetup of 2023. And this is a very topical session on working smarter. So this is about time management, working smarter and healthier to achieve greater well-being. And I think everyone probably at some point can relate to this person in this picture. he's got a mobile phone, he's got a tablet, he's looking at his watch, and he's trying to figure out how the heck am I going to do all this in this time frame. And so what we're going to sort of talk about, and Emma obviously is going to be the lead here, is to work through how can we be a little bit cleverer about the way we go about the various tasks that we have that need to be done. And Emma is a very old friend of ours and has been with Ethical Reading over the last 3 or 4 years. So delighted to have Emma back. She's at the Basingstoke College of Technology, and Emma will fill you in further in terms of her background. But she's worked with us on healthy and ethical workplaces and was, in fact, one of the drivers of that initiative, and that's still going strong. And she also provides training, mental health training for the Samaritans and various other organisations, and of course is a lecturer at the Basingstoke College of Technology. I'm Gurpreet. I'm one of the founders of Ethical Reading, and I'll be your host today. So what is Ethical Reading? We are a not-for-profit social enterprise. We're in fact now a community interest company. We launched in January 2018, and our mission really is to embed ethics into the way we do business in Reading. And what we want to do is create a community of organisations that are committed to our values, and these values are based around core ethics, values such as compassion, fairness, integrity, collaboration, and so on. We want to inspire people through some of the events that we do, a little bit like the event today. And there you see some pictures of various events and some of our initiatives. We want to provide some training and education so that people, it's not just about inspiration. We want to provide the tools for individuals and organizations to be able to put some of these ideas into practice. And we very much believe in collaboration, working together, because together we can achieve a lot more than individually. We have a whole bunch of resources that are available on our website. And over time, what we hope is that we can create a template here in Reading and provide that to other places, so we can create an ethical cities movement over time. So this is the agenda. Just a quick introduction, which pretty much is the end of that. I'm going to now hand over to Emma, and she'll go through the body of the talk. There will be an opportunity for everybody to have a chat and discuss how we put some of these ideas into practice, and then we'll have a discussion as a whole group afterwards, and there'll be a couple of wrap-up slides after that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Emma. Off you go, Emma, and I'll be your slide monkey, if you like. I'll move the slides backwards, forwards. If you,
I prefer glamorous assistant rather than slide monkey. That doesn't feel right, does it? Let's go with glamorous assistant.
No worries.
It depends if you're feeling that today. Yes, thank you very much for that. I've worked with Ethical Reading for a number of years, and it's a really great organisation trying to embed ethics into different ways of working in Reading. So although it says on there I work at Basingstoke College of Tech, I'm a counselling lecturer, so my main role is I'm a counsellor. So I have clients at home, and I also supervise other counsellors. I also deliver training to counselling agencies, so I support their counsellors develop themselves. But essentially all of my work really is around sort of well-being and helping people, become the best they can become. So, and I do that through education and also through counselling. So that's my main drivers, if you like. If you go to the next slide, Gurpreet. So this topic's time management. So it's about working smarter. So I think the key thing to say to sort of set an expectation is that this talk isn't going to be about sort of giving you time management techniques. There's enough books out there on time management to sort of sink a ship with regards to techniques you can use to manage your time more effectively. I think the way, hearing my experience, you can hear where I'm going to come at it from, which is more from a well-being point of view. And so looking at how we're using our time, who we're spending it with, and noticing the impact to ourselves and our well-being, if perhaps we're working in a way which isn't that healthy for us. So I think just to start off with on this slide, I think I find it really interesting thinking about how we talk about time, and that, you know, it isn't always logical. I mean, there are 7 days in a week, 24 hours a day, and yet people will say things like, I don't know where the week's gone, or January feels like it's had 50 days in it. The way our perception of time is really interesting. And I was listening to a podcast last night, and someone gave a really interesting sort of description of time, and they said something, just so have a think about it as you hear this. You know, if you've got a colleague at work, you don't know them particularly well, but they say, can I borrow £10 from you? You might be quite reserved and think, I don't know actually if I want to give them £10. But if they were to say, can you give me 10 minutes of your time? You might go, well, it's only 10 minutes. And I think that's really interesting with regards to how we think about the value we have of our time. And yet we use the words of currency when we talk about time. How are you spending your time? What's the value of that? So I find it quite interesting the way we speak about time. And when I work with clients, it's very often in the beginning of our work, I'll ask them, so what does your week look like? Because I want to get an idea of how they work, what's important to them, and how they're spending their time, because it may not be in the best of their interests, if you like. If we go to the next slide, Gurpreet. So if we look at the first slide, it is on the little clock, it says, what stories are we telling ourselves about time? And it's not that we're telling ourselves a lie or we're making anything up. When I say about the stories we tell ourselves, it can be that we are telling ourselves that there's a narrative about how we spend time. It might resonate with you. You might know people who do this and just say, I'm so busy, I haven't got time for anything. And I find it very interesting when you say to someone, how are you? And they say, I'm busy. So you're asking how a person is, but they're telling you they're being productive, which I think is really interesting when you hear how we talk about how you're spending your time. You want to know how someone is. So the I'm so busy, I think, is really interesting. And when I'm working with clients who have high levels of stress, I want to know what that busy means and where they're busy. And I think the second part, we're talking about our identity, and I find this really interesting. And there's a book that I'm reading at the moment by a person called James Clear, and he's written the book Atomic Habits. And what he speaks about is that if you have an identity where, say, for example, you can consider yourself a worker, a parent, a daughter, a friend, these are all parts of our identity. But if you're trying to put a new habit in place, for example, I don't know, like meditation, or if you're trying to put exercise into your week, but you don't see yourself as someone who is a fit and healthy person, that's not a part of your identity, then it doesn't matter if you write it in your diary, you're probably not going to do it, or you'll find a reason to make it not happen. So when we think about where we are on the last day of January, if there's anyone listening who thinks, you know what, I said in January, I had a New Year's resolution, I'd be doing exercise so many days a week. And if you notice that that isn't happening, consider that whole thing about the story we tell ourselves, but also think and ask yourself, you know, when you see yourself as your identity, am I someone who is a parent, carer, worker? And that actually has got in the way of you seeing yourself as a fit and healthy person, or a person who does meditation, journaling, or whatever. Because there's probably not a person here who doesn't think that exercise isn't good for them, but how many people actually fit that in and make time for it when maybe that isn't how they see themselves, which is interesting as a concept, but that's a whole big other subject there. We go to the next one. So this model, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Stephen Covey. He did a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what this quadrant image shows is something I'll talk about in a moment, which is we look at, for example, quadrant 1. This is all about how we're spending our time. It links in with our topic about working smarter. If you are someone who spends a lot of time in quadrant 1, where something is urgent and important, essentially that's the thing that's on fire. It's a project going wrong right in front of you. It's the ringing phone. It's an employee in front of you asking you for something right now, a signature or a decision. So that if a person is working in quadrant 1 all the time, where they're always doing, it will absolutely impact their mental health and physical health, because that's a high stress situation constantly. Now, we can all work in that area and when life gives us a curveball, but when it's constant, it will absolutely affect us in a variety of different ways. So quadrant 2, now this is where we should be working. Quadrant 2 is it's not urgent, but it's important. So this is where we need to be thinking around what is important to me. And in that quadrant there are things like self-care, exercise, eating well. It's also things like work projects. Are there hobbies and interests that are of importance to you? So you can already hear the difference in the energy levels. So when you're in quadrant 1, that's huge energy. It's a lot of energy, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety. It's happening right now. Quadrant 2 is it's much more peaceful. You're far more relaxed. You can sit back. You're working on something that's important, but it's not on fire. If you know, at the moment, I didn't mention earlier, but I'm also a student, so I'm planning my dissertation for my studies, and that's quite detailed work, but it's not high energy. Quadrant 3 is it's urgent, but it's not important. So those sort of tasks, so I don't know if you've ever experienced it, where colleagues just say, or anyone in your life, oh, can you get involved in this meeting? Can you help me with this? It's not anything to do with your work. It's not your quadrant 2 stuff. It's not what's important to you, but you get swept into something. And people might be very flattering and say, oh, you're so good at this. Can you help me with this meeting? You know, we really like your skills. And you go, oh, okay, I'll help. But it's nothing to do with you. So when we talk about working smarter, it's noticing if you have a list of things to do and they just get totally sidetracked by other people. Or, so this is where it talks about delegating. And is this really things that I want to get involved with? No. So it's quadrant 3. Quadrant 4 is it's not urgent and it's not important. Now, we might think of things like social media and gaming and scrolling on Instagram and things like that. But that's not necessarily the case, because we need to be mindful that for some people, gaming is fun. So that maybe that's part of their self-care. Social media can be a way to connect with others. That can be quite helpful. But what we need to be mindful of is the reasons why we're doing it. So for somebody who wants to do gaming, connecting with friends and having fun, that's one thing. If it's 8 to 9 hours a day and they're doing it to avoid life, that's a very different way of looking at those activities. And what I find when I work with clients is that if they're in quadrant 1, so everything's on fire, in order to cope with that, they're also spending time in quadrant 4. So they're on Candy Crush, they're on Instagram, they're doing something to take the edge off the day because work is too stressful. So what I find is people oscillate in between those 2 points. So in the questions that I put there, it's thinking about the personal cost. There'll be physical and mental health issues going on with someone who spends their time in quadrant 1. And if you're working on things that aren't important and there's no urgency to do it, you might be feeling quite low. So it's realizing that actually quadrant 2 is where we need to work. You know, what is important to me? What are the things that help me get out of bed on a day? And am I working on them on a regular basis? Or am I being completely sidelined by other people's agendas at times? If you go to the next one, go for it. So this is an interesting model, and I'll link it with a few things. I share this with clients a lot with regards to where they're spending their time and where they're spending their energy. So if we look at the key in the bottom left corner, it says what I can control is in the center. What I can influence is in the blue area. What is a concern to me, but I don't have any control or responsibility for, is the third. Now, if we go on the outside, thinking about things like the Ukraine war, that would be area 3. It's about things like Reading traffic. It's things that we can talk about. It's a concern to us, but we've got no control over at all. I spend quite a lot of time talking to clients about the second area, and specifically around what other people might be thinking, doing, or what their thoughts are. Now, we can only influence other people. We can't control other people. So if I think about this talk, you know, I can sit here and describe this model to you, but if you decide, actually, I think this is rubbish, I can sit here and say, no, it isn't, but I still can't control or change your mind. So it's about recognizing the boundary between level 2 and level 1. Now, level 1 is what I can control. My thoughts, words, actions, behaviors, my work ethic. These are things I can control. And that's about staying focused on where my energy is. And if we spend a lot of time thinking about other people's needs, what other people might be doing, and if other people like us, what other people think about our reputation, then we won't be spending time thinking about that quadrant 2 stuff because we're worrying too much about other people. So I find a lot of time I work with clients who are experiencing quite a lot of stress is that they're very external. So they're thinking about other people and actions. If we apply this to the pandemic, a lot of people were in the third area, worrying about what was going on outside of their control, and that gave a lot of anxiety, frequently depression, and feeling very overwhelmed, but not having any control. So it's thinking that from a time perspective, working smarter is that if we go, where am I spending my energy? Because our energy really should be right in the center. It's about my work ethic, what I think, and what actions I can take. We can sit here and say, oh, I wish this person would do this. I wish my boss would do that. Why do these people in my team do this? That is outside of your level of control. We don't know how things are going to land with other people. So by focusing on ourselves and staying with that model on the previous slide about what's important to us, we can work smarter and healthier, because it'll give us huge levels of anxiety and depression if we continue to think about things that we have no control over whatsoever. So we go to the next one, Gurpreet. So this is about boundaries. So we saw on the last slide, there's like 3 areas where we can spend a lot of our thinking time. So I talk to clients very frequently about healthy boundaries. And by that, I mean being available to people, but not all the time. So on the second area there, it says being available all the time will impact our mental health negatively. So we heard in the introduction some people saying, you know, they're coming out from the pandemic and working at home a lot. Well, it's been quite difficult from a boundaries point of view to switch off. A lot of people still find that they might be texting or WhatsApping members of their team late at night. So where are our boundaries around what hat we're wearing? Are we a worker? Are we at home? What are we? If we're wearing all our hats at the same time, it's going to be really difficult for us to be able to focus and concentrate on that quadrant 2 stuff that I spoke about and what's important. And the third point there is feeling responsible for other adults will impact our well-being. So if, for example, you've got people in your life that are struggling, or you've got people in your life that are difficult, especially if they're family members, that can be really hard, where you feel like you're just stretched. It's about having boundaries in place where you're available, but so that you can step away. So I've had conversations with clients before saying, you know, if you're finding that you're on the phone for an hour and a half every night with family members, that sounds really draining. What would it be like to say, I'll be available for 40 minutes and then I need to go? And they go, oh, I could do that maybe. And it's thinking about being available, but not all the time, putting boundaries around people, especially if you've got toxic people in your life. And by toxic people, I'm talking about, I don't know if you've heard this term, which I think is great, an awfulizer. People who think everything's awful. It's a disaster. It's very heavy. Or everything, or they're very critical. That can really, we can soak that stuff up. That can be really hard. So actually having a gap, having space from people like that is really important. Challenging if they're in the family, but about being available, but not all the time. So you can decompress and be around people that are important to you. Go to the next one, Gurpreet. So poor time management, the impact of well-being. So the mental health side of it. So if we don't give ourselves permission to rest and make time for what our needs are, that's the quadrant 2 stuff, it will impact our self-worth, how we feel about ourselves. If we're always focusing outside of ourselves, where's the time for us? So low mood or depression due to feeling unable to cope, or if you're under pressure, maybe because you're always in quadrant 1, firefighting. Increased stress and anxiety linked with an overloaded schedule or feeling responsible for other adults. So it just feels like there's a lot of weight on our shoulders. That's a lot to carry at times. So if we don't prioritize our own health and well-being into our weekly schedule, that can have an impact to our physical health, allowing other tasks to get in the way of our well-being, and increased blood pressure, weight, sleep, eating, poor habits for eating and drinking. So it's quite frequent that I've worked with clients who are in quadrant 1, so they're firefighting, and it's very difficult. They may, on the other side of that, have habits to help them cope. So they'll be thinking that they might be drinking more. They might be binge eating. They might be just eating rubbish food and not looking after themselves. So which increases blood pressure. So you can just see how by working smarter and going, where am I working in that quadrant picture and what's getting in the way of that can be really helpful from a point of view of our own well-being, and enables us then to do what's important for us. So we go to the next slide, Gurpreet. So this is where we're going to go into breakout groups and have a think about this. So what gets in the way of you not doing what you want to do with your time? So we're going to think about external factors. So about other people, events. It could be work, it could be family, things that are outside of yourself. And then internal factors. What do we do that prevents us from focusing on what's important? Because it's very easy to go external and project out and blame others. It's more difficult to go, do you know what? I'm getting in the way of myself. I'm noticing I'm not doing a thing each week that's good for me. What's that about? That's a question I ask clients all the time. What's this about? You're not doing that self-care you said you would. So I think, Joanna, if you were able to put us into groups, so the internal and external things that stop us doing what we want to do with our time.
And just one additional thing is, for each group, if you could have a spokesperson, please. That would be really useful for when we come back.
Have you been put in our group?
So I don't think I'm in a group. So you're not in a group. So I
So I
can,
think I can join. Oh, so if you open up the breakout room option, and then I think you can join in any room.
okay. I've joined you to room 4. Mhm. You want to be able to do is what you said. Oh, okay. Well, welcome back.
There we go.
The breakout room should be finishing off soon, so we'll have everybody back soon.
Okay.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, okay.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to get into a breakout room?
Yeah, it's just I think I've just been bounced back earlier.
Ah, okay, no worries. Well, everyone should be coming back momentarily.
Looks like the slides have shot forward a bit, Gurpreet. Any chance of going back to the one with the topic on for the discussion?
Yes.
Oh, back one. That's
There we
it. Awesome, lovely.
There we go. So we should be all back.
Yeah. So whether or not we can go round each group and maybe the spokesperson just summarise maybe some of the key things that came out. I'm happy to start with our group. We spoke about distractions sometimes getting in the way. Sometimes we can be in charge of those distractions, so the pinging phone and things like that, but that's one thing. We spoke about the fact that other people can be in quadrant one around us. We might be as well, but if we're all focusing on the same goal, then it gets done. But if everyone's fighting completely different fires around us, it's very difficult to actually coordinate and work on anything. And that's very stressful if everyone around you has their own agenda. We talked about procrastinating tasks. Specifically, we were talking about our tax returns and how my house is particularly tidy before my tax return because I avoid doing it. So it's sometimes procrastinating on tasks can be unhelpful. And we also talked about being realistic about some of the things that we're asking of ourselves and maybe putting too many tasks. And we can get in the way of ourselves by making ourselves feel bad because we're trying to do too many things. Yeah. So that was our group.
Cool. Who would like to go next? Group one was Brad, Lucy, Suzanne, and somebody called She Is.
I did write down what happened in our group, so I'm happy to
Cool.
read out what I wrote down.
Great.
So we had different people with different problems or different things come. So one person had an incredibly long commute, 2.5 hours each way, a couple of days a week, and that was the dominant factor. Another person was actually fell into the trap that Emma mentioned earlier, of being someone who always sacrificed her own projects or take care of herself time when somebody asked her to do something. So she came to somebody's rescue rather than going to the gym repeatedly, that kind of thing. And then another person's problem was that she just seemed to spend all the time in the office at work. The office might be at home, but still, she could get through a whole day and never get outside. And she also was worried about the kind of chaos of her office. Maybe chaos is too strong a word, but anyway, the mess in the office and therefore the difficulty of finding things. This is something I can relate to very well, I have to confess. And the general thought was that I need to get out of quadrant 3. Yeah.
Okay. And another group? Joanna, did you have a group?
So I was in Joanna's group. I stepped forward to speak for this one. So we mainly spoke about sort of that personal, I guess, outlook on the time that we're using, and that sort of the difference between want and should spend the time. So like you were mentioning about the phone call and that feeling of, you do want to do other things and sometimes you need to do other things, but you feel as though you should spend more time, say, on that phone call because maybe someone's ill or they're lonely or something. And it's about being a bit more rigid with setting those time limits in place. And we sort of discussed how, sometimes we can do it at work and we feel as though we're in a place to sort of be strict with our time there. But when it comes to those, family, friends, things like that, that's when you sort of struggle to set the time limits because you feel like you should spend more time there. Whereas, being a bit more rigid with how you spend your time, you almost get best of both worlds, and that you still have that phone call, say, but by limiting it to 40 minutes, you're still making sure you've got time to do all the other tasks that you need and want to do. And that means that, yes, you're fulfilling that quadrant 1, but then you're also doing a bit of the quadrant 4 where, you can just sort of zone out for the day. And you're also doing a bit of quadrant 2 where you can plan and actually make sure everything else is getting done.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Was that all the groups, or is there anyone else?
There was another group with Nick, Tanisha and Savik, Tom and Venkat. So who's reporting back from that one?
Nick, would you like to share this one?
Okay, yeah.
Lovely bit of delegation. Well done there.
I'll start. We looked at external, and what was clear is that one of the people in the group had a 4-hour round trip commute. Wow. Which meant that obviously that's effectively, by the time you get back to your front door, that's 12 hours of the day gone. And if you then add 8 hours in for sleeping, that doesn't leave a lot of time to do a lot of else during a Monday to Friday. I think the other point I'll pick up on was the fact that it was about opportunity cost of deciding to do one thing over another, because you're constantly weighing up and maybe even feeling a bit guilty about doing one thing or another. And I think, as you said, Emma, when you've got something to do, like your tax return and the house needs cleaning, all of a sudden the house needs cleaning goes to the top of the list.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you make a good point, because another book that I've read quite recently, which is on essentialism, is that if you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something. So if you're saying yes to being available to your friend for an hour and a half on the phone, but you're saying no to relaxing in the evening. So it's sometimes we think about being available and saying, yes, oh yes, I'll help you with this project. Yes, I'll do this. But also it's saying to yourself, if I'm doing that, then I am saying no to maybe going to the gym, doing what I want to do, which is a slightly different way of looking at it, perhaps.
Actually, we did discuss this too, on this particular point, in terms of how people prioritize meeting up with friends, reconnecting with people, especially post-pandemic, as a lot of us are deciding on how to best use our time. And then little do you know that you don't see people in half a year. A year has gone by because simply those priorities shifted. People are not so much inclined on saying yes anymore on just impromptu meetups, or even planned ahead meetings, because priorities have shifted in everybody's lives post-pandemic.
Yeah, good point.
I wonder also, Emma, if there is the categories that you had, the category quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So quadrant 1 is doing stuff, isn't it? It's just being basically that's reactive, if you like.
Yes.
Things come in and events happen and you respond to those events. Category 2 is planning, and things like doing tax returns involve a level of planning and thinking. And there is a guy called can't remember his name, but he's written that book about thinking fast and slow. Is it you?
Kahneman and Tversky.
Sorry, who is that, Brad?
It's two people, Kahneman and Tversky.
That's the one, yeah, Kahneman and Tversky. And brilliant book, by the way. If you haven't got it, I'd recommend reading it. But he he explains that actually people tend to shy away from what he terms slow, the slow form of thinking, which is the kind of cerebral way you have to sit down and do some planning and do some thinking around, well, why should I, do this or do that, and what are the pros and cons? And it requires some, serious brain thought, if you like. And people tend to shy away from that because it's actually quite taxing. So, thinking-wise. And people prefer to do stuff which doesn't require a lot of thinking, but just doing. And I'm thinking maybe people are almost naturally inclined to do as opposed to think. Because doing is more related to the gut, if you like. It's more related to the ancient brain, if you like, the back of the brain, the emotional side. And so, is there a kind of an aversion to doing that hard thinking people associate with, doing your tax returns, writing an essay, thinking about things deeply, and so that's why they don't do it, and they put it back on the back burner. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I think it involves you needing to be in the right place in your mind in order to do that sort of cognitive planning and thinking. And if you are someone who lives at 100 miles an hour, and you're a doer, that's a danger. And I think it's really interesting when we think about, are we human beings or are we human doings? That we're so used to doing that, being present and staying still and going, well, what actually is important to me? And I remember having a conversation even this week with a client going, what is it that's important to you? And she couldn't answer. I've not really thought about it. And I think you're right, it is hard, but I also think, well, it puts a person under a lot of pressure. Maybe I should know. So it's that should stick that Lauren mentioned. I should know how to do this. I should do this. I should do that. But it's not an easy way to start thinking, and it can be challenging. This is where I think sometimes having someone to go through it with you can be quite helpful. And I find that in therapy, people use therapy as a way to explore what they think about things. Might help to solidify it. Doing it on your own is quite hard work, perhaps. Yeah,
and I was also thinking, doing obviously is important as well. So I was thinking, it's not none of these categories are wrong. It's just understanding the balance, isn't it? So I had when I was working, I used to have a rule which was the classic 80-20 rule, which is you've got to preserve 20% of your time for the important but not urgent.
Mm-hmm.
And in a firefighting situation, at least, you might be 80%, 75%, and you might have a different ratio, but you've got to have some portion of your time on a weekly basis. That was my personal approach.
Yeah.
On a weekly basis, 20% of my time was thinking about things and doing that planning element, which was so they don't, things don't get out of hand, so they come back and bite you in the bum, as it were.
Yeah, indeed.
Maybe that's the way to think about it, is trying to carve out a bit of time in your week where you do that category 2 thinking. And obviously you've got to do the firefighting and you've got to do the doing bit as well.
Mm. Okay.
Any other techniques and approaches that people use? Perhaps they would like to share.
One thing I used to do in the corporate world is if there was too many people around me wanting stuff or demands on time, I used to book a meeting room, make up a fictitious title, and just go and sit in the room for an hour on my own and clear my head.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Having a meeting with yourself, that's it.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, effectively, I do. So in my time, I had in my diary, I just got chunks of time blocked out. I even do it now. I mean, so I've got a couple of hours at least blocked out every week, which is just thinking about stuff rather than reacting to an email or reacting to something. If you can do, and that's a bit like your meeting, isn't it, Nick? Where you're by yourself and you're just reflecting on, well, these are the important things, or just thinking about something.
Yeah, or sometimes I used just to sit in there with a blank sheet of paper, and sometimes stuff would come and other times it wouldn't. So I may have some scribbles or not. It was just an opportunity to get out of top gear and just coast a little bit and just observe and reprocess everything that's been happening.
Cool. Excellent.
I don't know, I hope Janet doesn't mind me saying, but she gave a really good idea that she uses, which is just having 3 things a day, as opposed to having a huge to-do list. What are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish, which is achievable? Because that's when we were talking about being realistic. It's just saying, if I list 10 things and I don't even get through half of them, you're not going to feel great about yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, but if I can achieve 3, awesome.
Brilliant. Cool.
And the other thing I find is good, if you do something that's not on your list, it's good to write it down and tick it off, so you don't feel like you've done something you shouldn't have done or you've wasted time.
But another opportunity to tick off something as well, which is always good for yourself.
Yes. Cool. Do you want to sort of summarise that, Emma?
Yeah, could you go forward to the next slide, Gertrude?
Sure.
So essentially, these are the things that sort of stand out that we might be able to do to look after ourselves, which is, number 1, spend time identifying what's important to you. Because if you're not sure what's important to you, how are you going to be able to plan and make sure those things happen? And it can then sometimes feel like we're getting swept up into other people's storms and we don't accomplish anything. And we can blame others. Oh, if it wasn't for all these people. But actually, it's because we haven't sat down and went, actually, what I want to accomplish this week is, even if it's just on a weekly basis, identifying habits you know are important to you and notice the ones that slip and explore why. So, if things are important to you and they're not happening, why is that happening? Is it because it's external, there's a lot of things going on around you, or are you getting in the way of yourself, if you like? Healthy boundaries in relationships. So, Lauren spoke a little bit about that just then. It's being available for people, but not to the detriment of your own well-being or to what's important to you. And finally, reflect on your phone habits. We've kind of spoken a little bit about being available a lot of the time and what healthy habits could we introduce. I think the nice guidelines being that, most adults think they spend 2 hours a day on their phone, but they actually spend on average 4. And that's not talking to a human being, that's scrolling. So if someone's spending 4 as an average, someone out there is also spending 8. So it's really easy for us as adults to go, well, kids these days on their phones, but actually not own the fact that the average adult is spending 4 hours a day on their phone. The challenge is that a lot of our work can be done on our phone, but again, that can be linking in with the stories we tell ourselves. Oh yeah, I need to do this on this phone. I need to do this. And not realizing how much of a time suck that phones can actually be, or how it makes us feel when we're scrolling on Instagram, for example, for hours, how it makes us feel. So there's a few things there we can kind of think about with regards to, well, how we spend our time and well-being. It's about people, it's about priorities, and about sort of the habits and getting into good habits with regards to sort of the time and how we spend it. So that's the summary of what we've kind of covered. Did you want to cover anything else, Gurpreet?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of wrap up with just one or two things that are coming up. But first of all, thank you for a fantastic session, Emma, on that. And of course, this will be, if you want to refresh any of the points, we will be making this available on our YouTube channel. So do go and have a look at that afterwards, and remember to click the subscribe button. We have a number of partners, so all of the things that we do are really thanks to the partners that we work with. So here are some of the partners and supporters. We're grateful to them for enabling us to put on some of these events. We'd love for you to engage with us further. Do visit our website, check out our various programs, including sustainability, sign up for the mailing list, and then you'll find out about all the stuff that we're doing and connect with us at a deeper level. We have a Trees for Reading program, and we planted approaching 100 trees. So if you would like to engage around that and perhaps donate, that'd be great. We're always looking for volunteers. So, if you would like to volunteer for us, that would be awesome. If you could click on, use a QR code there to just fill in the evaluation form for this event, that would be awesome. We will be sending out an email option as well, but we're trialing the QR code because people seem to like them as well. So leave that. This is the event that I was talking about, which is coming up on March the 1st. We'd love to have you join us. This is a face-to-face event, in-person event. It'll be at Apex Plaza, right next to Reading Station, and it's around the ethics of AI. It's about legal risk and the impact on everyday life. Artificial intelligent algorithms are becoming very prevalent across so many different domains. And whilst they certainly offer incredible advances, for example, I don't know if anybody's played with ChatGPT, which is the new tool released by Microsoft, which is AI powered, but it effectively enables you to achieve a much smarter, much more intelligent search engine. Teachers are really worried because some of the responses that it gives are very coherent, very sensible, and almost essay-like. So lecturers and universities and so on are very concerned that there'll be an awful lot more plagiarism. But at the same time, they offer enormous benefits too. And it is really understanding what are those issues, both for education, in terms of traffic, things like automated vehicles, social media, and so on. Yeah, the list is endless. And we're delighted to have Dr. Jeff Keeling from Google Research. He's a research scientist there, and Hilary Aldred, who's a partner with Pennington Manchester Cooper, at that session. Again, you can scan that QR code to register for that event. We'd love to have you join us. So thank you very much, and have a safe and pleasant evening. And we hope to see you at one of those events going forward. Thank you.